Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empower to Live, where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. I'm your host, Andrea Rose Butler, Becoming Woman's Network. So glad that you are here with me on this evening, and I just appreciate all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us here on the Empower to Live podcast. And as you all can hear, my voice is still struggling. So after our show last week, I ended up having to go to the doctor, and this man had a double ear infection and a sinus infection, and they just came on out of nowhere. But I am on the healing side, and so I thank God for that, and I thank God for all of you who are offering prayers up for me on this week. So much has gone on. We had our her table brunch on this past Saturday as well. Even though I wasn't feeling well, I was like, we're going to push through because we have no other time to do this. And time was so important, and that we wanted to get that done. We had a great turnout. I'm super excited. We had about 50 ladies to show up on Saturday, and we gave out a bunch of gift baskets, and just we had them share about what they were grateful for, or a lesson that they learned this year that will take them into 2026. And so a lot of expression of gratitude. One for the fact that we are there, but a lot of them are just grateful for health um, and some didn't quite know what their vision or plan was for 2026. So that may be something that we will work on, excuse me, in 2026 to prepare them for 2027. So a lot of things will be going on with her table, and we're meeting with a commissario in the new year to kind of express some of those things that we were looking into, thinking about doing, some workshops and classes and different things like that. So keep us in prayer for that effort and for the lives that we are able to touch through the Becoming Woman's Foundation. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to my website and the Becoming Woman's Foundation, and you can see the work what we're doing, what it's all about. And if you would like to support us, we will greatly appreciate that as well. So let's jump into today's episode. We are still talking about gratitude in motion. So we know the last month or so we have been talking about gratitude and why gratitude is so important for us, especially as it relates to our health, to our life, how to deal and to have gratitude when life is difficult. And, because life doesn't always go the way we want it to go, but we're told to uh, be grateful and to be thankful in every situation. And that is a process that we go through in order to get there. And it takes work. It takes, and we're talking about intention today. So we are in um, week 3 of our series, Gratitude in Motion. And we're talking about vision with intention, how to prepare our heart for the new year. So, this is a time, this is a season, and I've been talking about purpose and vision mostly throughout this year. We're talking about other things, but my focus and the focus of the Empower to Live podcast is to prepare you to walk into the vision and purpose that God has created and ordained you to be and to do in the earth. Now, we are all created with purpose. We don't always necessarily know what that is. And maybe because a lot of times life happens, we go through these detours and all these things that happen. We make poor choices and all these different things. But everything that we go through, the detours, the poor choices, the life happening, all these things, God can use it and work it together for our good to bring glory to Him and to His name. And so he wants to use us. And so we are vessels to be used, but we have to be intentional about walking in our purpose and walking in our vision. We have to prepare for it. It doesn't just happen We don't just say, oh, look, here I am. I'm in my purpose. Um, but it takes us to be intentional and to be aware of what it is that God's doing in and through us. And that's the important part. It's about coming to that place of having that vision. Habakkuk 2 and 2 tells us to write the vision and make it plain so that he who reads it can run with it. And I've talked a lot about writing down visions. And in January, actually, will myself and Pat Weatherspoon from Breakthrough Flag Ministries are going to host a vision board party. And we're talking about renewing your dreams and how to intentionally find your purpose. And she's going to share about how worship helps, will open in your eyes, because when we're worshiping, we allow God to come in His presence. This is a free workshop. We're starting to promote that, and I will actually be on her show on Monday on Facebook. So look out for that. I believe it's at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Monday for break Breakthrough Flag Ministries. So be on the lookout for that. And so we've got to write the vision down. We have to know what it is, and we have to plan and prepare for it. So when we write it down, it's not about making a wish list of this is what this is what I want. And we write lists down. I want to lose weight. I want to get healthy. And we write stuff that's so vague. Well, we have to be purposeful. And I've talked about this before, so you can go back and look at those episodes on our YouTube channel to get that. So but our vision, we're intentional. It's about partnering with God in purposeful direction, so that He gives us purpose and direction for where we're going and how we get there. So this is a partnership. God created us with purpose, and so He knows the purpose we were created. No one is here by accident. We are here on this earth with purpose, because God intended for you and I to be here, to be in this space, in this time, in this season, in this year. And so we have to partner with Him to say, okay, you wrote the book of instructions, and you want me to be in relationship with you. And out of that relationship, I need you to speak to me and let me know what it is I'm supposed to be doing, where I'm going. And so it's just like following that GPS. We can listen to the GPS when it's talking, or we can say, oh, I know where I'm going. And then we find ourselves down a wrong road or a wrong pathway because we thought we knew where we were going. But we have, God's position and system where He knows where we were positioned and purpose to be. And so vision is important, and it matters because, a new year doesn't create clarity. We do. And that's aligning our hearts with God and making sure that we are hearing His voice. I heard a pastor, I think it was Pastor Rutland, um, and he's been doing this series, every day, where he's talking about, how we can, be in alignment with God. And one of the things he talked about yesterday was fasting, about how do we fast to hear from God and get that clarity that we need. And I know my church usually does something in the new year where we fast, but I think even before the year starts, that in order for us to get clarity, we need to begin even now preparing. And this is what we're talking about, preparing our hearts with intention to hear from God and to have Him give us clear eyes and vision to see and to ground ourselves in our purpose. When we know our vision helps protect us and to help us say yes with intention, and also says help us to say no with confidence. I talked about that in that series on boundaries as well. But before you plan, you've got to pause and find out, okay, so what are the things that hinders me from having a clear vision? Setting goals from pressure. Where we think people always tell us, I think you'd be good at, and you're like, and you're not feeling it. But sometimes we go into things because people tell us, and because we listen to them, and we think, oh, they're wise. But are they hearing from God about me? Or am I moving in this direction because somebody else told me this is what I need to be doing. And so your calling doesn't come from comparison, it doesn't come from pressure, it comes from God. Hearing his voice and knowing, looking back at your life, and we talked about a whole series. So all of this stuff I've talked about. So this is kind of a refresher as we are preparing for the new year with intention. Sometimes we can feel overwhelmed with planning. And so you think that we've got, got to have 100 steps written out. And I told you about my thing with perfection, and about perfectionism. And this is why it took me so long to get this podcast going, because I had ideas of how I thought it should be. And so I was like, I got to do this, and this needs to be in place, and that needs to happen, and this needs to happen, and I can't move until I do this. And I was like, no, just do it. Why? Just move. Take that first step. Step away from, because a lot of times we procrastinate out of fear, and we don't want to take that step. And you're like, well, what if I fail? And what if you do? And one of my favorite scriptures is that whatsoever the righteous does will prosper. So even if it looks like you're failing, you're prospering, because he says whatever you do. So even failure is prosperity with God, because what you're learning, you're growing, and you're being developed. And so when we think about, when we get held up by that fear of failure, it keeps us from going, and it keeps us stuck, and we can't move forward into what he's calling us to. So failure is not final. It is formative. It helps us to grow. Sometimes we lack clarity about our direction, and God can't whisper to us over the noise. And this is why sometimes we need to be still, and have that intention of saying, okay, God, I need to hear from you today. And if I was hearing, I think it was yesterday also, I don't remember who the pastor was, but he was talking about David. And David, when the Philistines had basically taken over, stole their stuff. And, he was like, should we go up and pursue them? And he was like, yes, go and recover all. Yes, go and recover them. And so he had to silence, his men were angry, and all those voices that were around him, let's go do this, let's do this. And this is what we're going to do when we get there. And he was like, no, I need to hear from you. And sometimes we have to silence all the noise and the voices, so that we can actually hear the whisper of what God is telling us to do and so again, we're talking about vision with intention, preparing for the new year. So we prepare with intention, we have vision, we do it with purpose, we're listening, and not just listening to everyone, because not everyone can speak to you about where you're supposed to be going. You can be in a car with 10 people, and everybody has directions on how to get there. Well, I've been this way, and I know this. But what does the GPS say? What does the GPS say? Because the GPS can tell you about road closures and detours, where yes, you may have been that way before, but you haven't been this way right now in this season. And so that's why it is important for us to hear, to listen, and to heed. And so how do we overcome these blockers, these things that keep us from moving forward with our vision, with our purpose? Pray. Number one, pray. That's the first step. Ask the Lord, what are you building in me? What are you showing me? What is it that you need me to do in 2026? What's that step? What's the first thing I need to do? I've been talking about this Her Table program, and this was something that that was kind of started out as a um, a Chat GPT idea of what can we call this brunch? What do we want to call it? The brunch we had was one for Mother's Day, and we called it, Her Table. And as as God has been speaking to me about this, it has developed into an actual program in the coming year. And God even gave me what her stood for. And it was building, because I was listening. I was like, this, we can't just be about just sitting down and eating and having fellowship and having that. And community is important. That's a good part of what we want to do. But he was like, health, empowerment, and restoration. And I was like, wow. And that it just came to me, and I was just like, God, this is what you're. And that table is for all of us are welcome at the table. We don't discriminate about who sits at this table, because all of us as women need to be healthy. We need to be empowered to walk in our purpose, and sometimes we need to be restored back to our, God's original design and intent for us. And so this is, so you're going to hear me talking about the Her Table, and this is now a program that we're going to be doing, and some more to come on that. But it took prayer and listening and heeding, and not saying, getting out of my way and getting out of God's way, and listening to Him and His direction. We need to break the vision down small. Like I said, it started out, if it's just going to be a Mother's Day brunch, it was going to be a one-off. It's going to be just, we're here in the community, here we are. And then, Mother's Day didn't work out, and, a whole lot of stuff went on, and we didn't have it till July. And then the July event turned out to be something totally different that we had planned for May. God had other plans. And in that event in July, we started to see the needs and the cry of the women here in our local community, both locals and immigrants, because that's who we are in this country. We are immigrants here in Mexico. So people say, well, we're an expat. You're an immigrant here. You have immigrated here. And so that, what is the cry of the heart of these women? And so it just kind of broke out of, God was like, listen, quiet your own thoughts and put aside your own needs and listen. And so I had to break it down. And as we started breaking it down, they started to grow. And so now we have spirit-led steps because we're listening. Obedience is always key. Because sometimes God calls us to do stuff and we think it's too big. We think we can't do it. We are afraid, but what if it doesn't work out? Well, what if this happens and what if that happens? And, like I always tell, someone says, what if this doesn't work out? And I'll say, well, what if it does? What if it does? So let's flip that over and look at the positive and say, I'm preparing for it to work. I'm not preparing for it to fail. And we have to change our mindset and think about this way. I am preparing to succeed. My what if is what if it succeeds, not what if it fails. And this I keep telling myself, what if it does succeed, and not what if it fails. And I want you to put that kind of as your new word, instead of, so what if this happens, and what if it fails? No, what if it succeeds? And let that be your mantra for 2020. Whatever the righteous does will prosper. So it's not going to fail. Some things you're going to get something out of it. It's going to be development, all the different things that happen. And so it's not failure, it's growth. And we want to hold on to that, and that whatever I do in 2026 is going to prosper, because I'm hearing, I'm not failing, I'm growing, and I'm becoming. And that's what we're going to hold on to for 2026. Whatever we do will prosper. So align your goals with scripture and not comparison. I'm not looking at anybody else, not looking to the right or to the left, or who's doing what or who's not doing what. What I have to stay in my lane and run my race. I can't worry about anybody else, because when you start looking around, that's when you trip up, because you're too busy looking at others instead of looking at the race set before you, and not about the race set before anybody else. So we're not going to compare, I'm not going to compare ourselves. We're going to align ourselves. God, what is your purpose? What is your vision for me? What are you saying to Andrea for 2026? What are you telling me to do? And not anyone else for me. And so purpose is about obedience and not performance. Again, we're only required for the effort and not the outcome. So as we step into 2026, as you're planning for your new year and what God is calling you to do, we have to do it with intention. And we're going to do it with intention. We're not going to be a pie in the sky. We're going to write the vision down. We're going to make it plain. We're going to seek God. We're going to pray. We're going to be obedient. We're going to take those first steps that he wants you to do. Talked about that command of preparation that God has already told you, do this, and you've been hesitating. And he's saying, I need you to do this first step first in order for you to see anything else take place. So if that's you, if you've been procrastinating, if you've been afraid and you've gotten stuck, I just want to encourage and motivate you today. Take the step, take that leap, jump in with everything you've got, and move forward, because God has an awesome plan for you. You were created on purpose with purpose, but you've got to move into that purpose and not allow yourself to be stuck, to be stuck by fear and whatever it is that's holding you back. The voices of the stranger that has been telling you, oh, you're never going to be, and it's never going to happen. And even sometimes it may be your own voice. But I remember what I said, everything the righteous does will prosper. It will prosper. That's the word for you and for me for 2026. Whatever that we know that God has purpose for us. And even if it looks like failing to you in your eyes, God is saying that you are prospering. And so I don't want you to hold on to that. So, what is God calling you to focus on in 2026? But it's spiritually, emotionally, relationally, personally, that God is looking for growth for us in 2026. So, take this time as you are preparing for the end of the year to sit down, find some quiet time. I know Christmas is next week and there's a lot, it's still holiday shopping and we've got planning for this, and you may have company coming over and you got to cook the meals and all, and we're busy. I just want to encourage you to just take a moment, first thing, if you got to get up, a half an hour earlier and sit with God and say, okay, God, speak to me. What is it that you need me to work on for 2026? Or what is it that you have been telling me to work on that I have been reluctant to do and I have been disobedient? Ask God to give you courage to step into and to do that thing in 2026. And I'm going to be there cheering you on and be excited. I want you to share with me, if you need me to pray with you about whatever it is that's been holding you up and holding you back, to shoot me a message, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, or go to my website and send me a message there, whatever you want to do, however way you want to get in contact with me, kind of share what it is that you feel that, maybe you've been stuck and you just need somebody to encourage you in that, or to pray with you. Message me and let me know. So our weekly challenge, we can't end our show without us having a challenge. So I talked about that, our vision board workshop that is coming up on January the 13th of 2026. So to get you in preparation for that, if you're interested in going, also send me a message. So we'll be sharing the link about that. It will be a live session on Zoom. So you'll need an invitation to that. And so just let me know if you're interested in that as well. But in order for you to get prepared, even for that, you can start now by creating a faith and purpose vision board. So again, we're praying. So it includes scripture, your word of the year, and you can go. There's some websites out there that will help you with discovering what your word of the year is. And I saw one that talks about, what has God been speaking to you in 2025? What is those things that have been in your heart? What's the one word that keeps coming up over and over again in this year? Maybe it's a lesson that you learned that has impacted you, and that you feel like this is my word that I'm going to hold on to for 2026. And that's something that you can do to look that up. Mine has been Envision. Envision has been my thing, and God is like, you can see it now. So there's clarity, and you were given vision now, and I'm so excited about that word. That Envision is my word for 2026. I've been seeking and I've been praying and I'm thinking about it. And in a vision, even as I was looking at this and preparing, and I was like, what is my word for 2026? And then vision was the word that came for me. So that's, you're going to see a lot of stuff that I'm going to be saying in 2026. It's going to be talking about envisioning and actually realizing and actualizing, according to Webster, that when you envision, you can actually actualize and realize the thing that you see, your vision. So envision is now the action part of just having the vision, is putting it into action to realize it and to bring clarity. And I was like, oh, okay, I like that. And so God centered intentions, habits that you want to build, and all these things as you're preparing for your 2026. And your vision board, your faith vision board, is not a wall decoration. Even though I did have mine up in my office, and would, when I do them, I hang them up in my room so that I can see them and that they're before my face. And it's not just about pictures, or words, but it's intention. What am I going to do? And I wanted to. I think it's in my closet. My 2023, I think it was, vision board. One of those things was that I had on that vision board was saying about women, empowering women to walk in vision. And I was just like, wow, that was 2 years ago that that happened, and that was a quote that I saw, and I was like, okay, God, that's who, and that's what He called me to do, and this is He. I'm walking in that word now. I've been walking in it actually for the past year, and even more so in 2026. So when we do these vision, faith and vision boards, it's not just about words or pictures or anything. It's putting down with intention, looking at it. That's kind of you writing down your vision and making it plain. So when you see it, you can run with it. You know what you need to do for the new year. So, get those boards together, get your markers, get magazines if you like to cut out words and paste them on the board. If you need pictures to visualize, that's something you can do. You can also download my free ebook entitled Renewing Your Dreams, um, Living Purposefully at Any Age. That is available. It's free. I wrote that a few years ago, and we've tweaked it some and added some extra stuff to it. So that is available. You can go to my link tree on Instagram to find that, and or search back in my post, or I may put a link out there for that. And so that is something that we can do. How do we live with purpose? Because that's what God has called us to do, to live purposefully. Like I said, you're not here by accident. So again, I want to thank you all for joining me on today's episode of Empowered to Live. We're walking out our vision with intention, and your vision doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be purposeful. So don't look for perfection and don't get stuck there in perfection, but do it with purpose. So I will see you all next week. We're talking about walking into the new year with faith and gratitude, as we are looking to start wrapping up 2026 and for another wonderful year. I Until I see you all again on next week. Um, Next week will not be a live. It's going to be pre-recorded because it's Christmas Day. But if you want to join me out there on Christmas Eve to watch that episode of Walking into the New Year with Faith and Gratitude, again, I appreciate you. You all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and good night.